Hello, and welcome back to the Safety Brief. Today, we're digging into a major disruption that hit European airports, the ransomware attack on the Collins Aerospace. This incident didn't just slow a few systems down, it grounded flights, caused chaos for passengers, and highlighted just how fragile critical infrastructure can be when third-party vendors are involved. Had to meet you there. Sorry. So let's unpack what happened and talk about the lessons we can take from it. I have Mike and Matt here with me today to tackle this topic, and as always, I appreciate you both being here.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. So, first things first, let's break down what actually happened. According to the Bank Info Security, hackers compromised Muse software developed by Collins Aerospace, and that's the tool that airlines use to share check-in desks, onboarding gates, and so on. So when Muse went offline, airports across Europe lost the ability to process check-ins. So you can only imagine how chaotic that could have been. The EU Cybersecurity Agency later confirmed that this was a ransomware attack against a third party provider tied to Collins. So, with that context, Mike and Matt, can you dig a little deeper into what type of ransomware or threat vector was actually used here?
Yeah, most definitely. And I think, to start us off, it was not many of these streams ago that we talked about a formal advisory put out by the FBI regarding aerospace travel and airports being a target that is both easy to impact and high severity if impacted, right? Like there's a massive amount of impact. And so I think it's interesting that what we were talking about and what the FBI had put public notice on, I want to say this summer, late this summer, it wasn't a lot. We're seeing more and more prevalent. And I think there's something to be said about not just the direct impact to the airport and check-ins and boarding and all of that mess, because we have plenty of team members on our team that fly. I've flown for events, and when you're flying on the regular, it seems like we run into these issues more and more, right? It's like you think you just run into them more because you fly more, but it's been happening a lot. Everything from lost baggage to things that are attributed to technical difficulties, but really are cyber attacks and like these systems being crippled, right? And so I think it's interesting that again we're seeing this as a trend, and I don't I don't see a strong level of response from air carriers or real airports. Like it just seems to be this apology tour where it's like, hey, we're down, sorry it happened. We'll book you on the next flight. Like there's zero acknowledgement of the immense amount of heartache and pain that's generated through stuff like this. Not to mention on IT teams that have to support these users that are sometimes stranded, right? Like you think about what IT teams have to deal with if the users are expecting to be back in the office by the end of the weekend and they're not. Now they need help accessing things remotely. Now they need help getting Outlook on their computer. So again, there's a waterfall effect of impacted attacks like this, but I am disgruntled to say we're talking about this again. Needless to say.
Yeah, you kind of hit it on the nail there. It doesn't just affect the airport, right? It affects all the passengers, the businesses that those passengers work for, and so on. It wasn't just a glitch, right? It was an actual targeted attack on critical systems. So thank you so much for that breakdown. I think it's also important that we touch on why third-party vendors create so much risk in critical infrastructure. What's your take on that?
Yeah. And this is another big piece where, CMMC, at least on the US side of the house, is trying to get in front of where supply chain vendors and now critical infrastructure, natural gas, power, water, solar, all of these utilities that are cellular, right, especially radio frequency, are again another one of those things that are easy kinetic targets, but have a major amount of impact and overflow. I mean, even, this is a little off topic, but even in the past 72 hours where we've seen stories break about these SIM card server rooms, like SIM server rooms, where the FBI is uncovering these insane amounts of tech that are staged in large impact cities like New York City, like others, that can take out entire cell carriers or areas of coverage through jamming. And so, um, again, uh, it there's a lot going on in cyberspace right now. That's been the story for quite a while, but I think more and more often, it's getting more airtime. Really,
Yeah.
and no pun intended against the airports, but really, news coverages are increasing of the level of risk this stuff poses. And the FBI is putting all the advisories out they can in public communication, and CISA, another really good resource about various advisories seen in the space. But we've had 0 days come out. We've had so much going on. Threat actors are not sitting there idle by any measure of that word.
Thank you for that. Matt, anything from you on third-party vendors? I know you've tackled that a couple of times on previous safety briefs.
Nothing we haven't already said before. It's, I mean, need to be vetting things, need to be less reliant on third parties. I mean, this was expected. This should have been anticipated. There's no reason this should not have been prevented. Payload was over 3 years old. So this is on them for having crappy security.
No, I 100% agree. These types of attacks can be prevented. So let's talk about the impact now. Do we know what the immediate fallout looked like for this, or what we usually see in attacks like this?
Yeah, I mean, directly impacting, I think it was something like 270 plus scheduled flights grounded. And one thing that, not to harp on the travel woes component, but it is related, is there was a whole nother thousands of flights scheduled for the next day, and those were booked for, and those were scheduled, and travelers were already accounted for. And so it's not even a matter of do we have enough lifeboats kind of a situation. It's um, where can we put these people that are traveling? I mean, we're going into holiday season. Travel is not going to turn the volume down, right? As far as frequency is concerned, people are going to travel more. But honestly, flipping the coin on the other side, I wonder what the consumer frustration with this will be that says, no, we're not traveling this year. Like, we've had so many issues and so many problems, and it's going to cost us $800, $1,200 travel as a family. I think we're going to just take an L and maybe not
Stay
visit
home.
not visit the in-laws, which some people may be happy about, some people may not. But I think it's just going into holiday season. There's a time that brings people together organically for good reason. But I think that with the volume of these occurrences happening, airlines are going to have to do something to preserve their revenue streams because users aren't going to keep putting up with this. Matt said it perfectly. This is laughably not sophisticated of an
Yeah.
attack. There is no, incredible 0 day payload hitting these airports. It's antiquated tech. It's antiquated security. It's apathetic reactions to all the recent attacks. And again, it could be belabored why these airports may be doing less. I think airline travel in general has had a lot of woes between air traffic control and near misses, like collides with various airlines. Like we've seen that this year too. And so I know they're doing what they can from the aspect of hiring more ATC operators and incentivizing those that are good at that job to stick around. But that's good from the safety perspective. And I applaud that, and that is good. We got to see something done from the stability side of the house for air travel, again, because Amtrak's not going down. It's very much airports. It's very much airlines. And again, that's where the majority of people are. But, I can't help but wonder if, because of all the ramifications of these cyber attacks and the lack of, candidly, control that airports seem to have over this situation, I'm curious to see what air travel frequency looks like and what the polls show as far as who goes for the holidays and who doesn't.
I'll play devil's advocate. It's not going to have any impact on it. We see the same thing all the time in every industry. The SolarWinds attack didn't change anything. The NPM attack didn't change anything. The only thing it changed is people had to go and update the packages. It's going to be the same thing with air flights. You're not going to actually have any change because what other option does anybody have? You can take a train. Cool. That sounds great. I'd love to take a train and lose a day to a day and a half of my planned vacation while I'm slowly making my way to that location. That doesn't work for most people. They have a set parameter of things that they want to do, and they can't just go through and augment that trip, on a whim. So they're probably not going to have really any impact. There's more impact that will come from Southwest charging for bags than there will be for this kind of an impact, because at this point, people are used to it. This isn't the first time that, there's been a mass outage and people have been forced to reschedule their flights. What was it? CrowdStrike causing the lovely blue screen issue that impacted airports.
It impacted a lot more than airports.
Yeah. Booking systems, everything were down. People were not able to get on their flights, get to where they needed to go, etc. Didn't stop anything. Air travel has increased since that incident. So this is no different. The only minor complication is the fact that there could be information that was taken during the attack that you now have to look for on the back end, because they were in the systems. There was a ransomware attack. There you go. Standard ransomware playbook is in play. That data had to go somewhere. We don't know if they paid to get it restored. Even if they did, they're still going to sell the data. You have to assume that is going to be done. I know we've talked about it before where, it seems as though ransom operators actually have a higher ethical code than many Fortune 100 companies when it comes to what they say, such as, if you do this, then we will do this and we will not sell the data. But they're still criminals. They can hold themselves to a higher ethical code than most organizations, but at the same point, they still ransomed all your data. So you have to be aware that even if they give you the data back, they still have copies of it. They aren't necessarily obligated. There is no contract they're signing with you. So
Yeah.
that's where the main thing is going to be on the back end. That's what you have to look at.
Yeah, thank you for that, Matt. And to Hornsby's point, I think there won't be, like Matt said, a huge downgrade on the actual travel. However, the passengers who were impacted should be angry because, like you said, it could have been prevented. But I want you to think about working in a coffee shop. And you work at this coffee shop and you have a third-party vendor who you purchased your cash register, your card system, all that checkout or payout stuff through, right? They have an attack. Your systems are down. All the other 10, coffee shops under that, company are also down. The passengers are angry at that shop, at that person behind the desk. However, it's the vendor. But I don't think that airlines should also point the finger at the vendor, because time and time again, and we've pointed this out on the Lebanon incident, we've pointed this out multiple times, that you need to be able to have those hard conversations with your vendors. You need to be able to validate their cybersecurity or their security, what they would do in those types of situations, and so on. So having a plan in action and having that trust with your vendor is super important, because it can be something as little as your check-in system,
Right.
to break down multiple different aspects of your industry or business. So, and it is crazy to think that one service being unavailable can ripple through the entire industry. It's just
Right. Especially when that service is popular. And we saw that with CrowdStrike, right? Where,
yeah.
again, we're not disparaging, we're not picking on them, but they're a commonly adopted platform for endpoint security. And because of that market presence and market share, it makes it a huge target. That if that domino falls, a lot of dominoes fall. And that's what we saw. But I think ultimately, And for the people listening and our partners and people who have never heard of us before, like, I think the reality of the situation is your company's reputation rides on the vendors and solutions you choose.
Yeah.
And right now, American Airlines or whoever it's going to be next in the stories is gonna bear the brunt of that impact. That brand is gonna be what users remember, right? And just like you said, Elizabeth, nobody's gonna think of, well, if only they could find a more reliable POS system, none of us would have this issue, right? I
No, they're gonna
wish
yell at the cashier.
consumers were so understanding. Yeah, exactly. But they're not. And so I think the word to the wise here and the forewarning is in the cybersecurity landscape, there are a myriad of variables that go into a purchasing decision. There is commitment level, there is cost, there is what is the path to onboard, there is what's included, what is the lift of effort or lack of effort that we need now that we've outsourced some stuff, right? All of these variables. But ultimately, I think what we all need to acknowledge is that those vendors we partner with are people we've put ink on paper for our reputation to ride on. Whether we like it or not, that's just the way it is with consumers and end users. And so with that, ultimately, I think that's why we take preemptive security so seriously, because we take the promises that our partners are making to their users as our own promises, right? If we're not able to keep users working, if we're not able to keep uptime at an all-time high, 99.99 or higher, then we failed our partners, and our partners have failed their clients, right? Because there's promises made, there's commitments built, and there's a lot of money invested in uptime when it comes to information systems and security. And so I think ultimately it was a good point that the vendor thing came up and a worthy tangent, but I think, don't let term a free phone, right? Like you see all these cellular providers buying people's loyalty with, we'll give you a free phone, just stick with us for 3 years, right? Service could be crap. Who knows, right? It could be packaged in with Netflix or all these things. There's all these nice and shiny things that these cellular providers are putting in front of users, but what are they doing? They're bribing their loyalty, right?
Yeah.
Users aren't sticking with a carrier because the service is good anymore. They're sticking with a carrier because they've been bought and paid for, right? With a new phone or a new service. And so just be wary as consumers at the business level and at the executive level. If you are shopping for a solution that is going to either directly positively impact or negatively impact your company's reputation, just be wary of those vendors that may be just flying free phones out to you and putting some shiny things in your pocket, right? Not to say giveaways aren't good, not to say all these contests and prizes aren't good. Those are fun things, and they gamify a really, really fun and sometimes dark space in the security world. But be wary of the reasons why you partner with vendors. And ultimately, if it's something that you want to sleep good at night and know that your reputation's riding on, good to go. But that's the level of commitment we bring at BLOKWORX. It's the level of commitment our team brings. And it's really why we're cut from a different cloth, I think, and because we're just about it for a different reason, I think. But ultimately, TED Talk aside, the vendors piece was important because, again, it talks about the PR impact. It talks about the reputation. It talks about are they going to fly American or Spirit or Southwest ever again because of this? And while
even if it wasn't then.
Right. While it might not have been an American Airlines stamped software or an American Airlines employee or whatever it is, right? I'm picking on American Airlines. Whatever the employee of the airline is, it is their problem. And for our MSP partners and for those IT teams out there, users will not be so sympathetic to say that, oh, well, CrowdStrike is a big company and they just had a bad day, right? Like they're going to remember this is what you provided, this is what you recommended. And so just take it to heart. That's my point.
As we've said a million times on the safety brief, ask the hard questions.
Right.
Now, let's flip this over to the preemptive side. What lessons does this incident hold for future preparedness and resilience, not just for airports, but for other businesses watching this unfold?
I think, again, Matt pointed it out earlier in black and white speak, right? I think there are two paths forward. You can learn from these events as a vendor, as a company, and harden and communicate. Because here's the reality, right? I think that's the difficult piece about the industry we're in is we can do a whole lot of stuff, but if we haven't properly communicated or we haven't put enough PR out there about here's why we're upgrading this, here's how we're bolstering this, we see this as the number one most exploited vector, here's how we in the next 2 quarters are doubling down on that hardening process, right? That's a journey we're going through right now internally, is how do we always improve, always get better. If we stagnate, the security risk increases because all these threat actors are innovating every day. And so I think the communication piece is important. And you know, whether it's for the right reasons or not, I think airlines and airports have gotten better at trying to get communications out of like, hey, this wasn't technical difficulties. Like, we got owned. Here's what happened. I think 2 to 3 years ago, everybody had technical difficulties, and everyone's like, I don't know, there's a lot of technical difficulties. And they could have been cyber attacks, right? But I think from a PR perspective, um, again, you can learn from these lessons. You can learn from the pain points in front of you. But there is great, longevity from a business perspective, and looking at people either parallel to you in the industry or perpendicular across the street in a totally different industry, and looking at the pain points they're going through and saying, that's not going to be us. What do we got to do? Right? How do we strategize? How do we plan? What do we got to do? Tabletop exercise. What do we got to do? What kind of conversations do we need to have strategically? And Gartner's come out and said it, and we presented on this on just this past week. But Gartner came out and said it. By 2030, in just 5 years, 75% of all security stacks have to be preemptive because detection and response isn't working. And so some people will see that signpost and as a billboard driving down the highway, and they're going to we got to do something about that. And other people will say, hasn't happened to me yet. And they're just going to lay in wait. But cyber natural selection's real.
Conversely, Gartner is not always the best area to look at for things. Are they correct that there is a need for preemptive security? Absolutely. But we also have to realize that these are the same people that for the longest time still said McAfee was a quadrant leader for products that did nothing. These are the same people that hyped up CrowdStrike. And look what happened with that. So there's a lot that you have to look into, and you have to take it with a grain of salt, and you need to do your own research. Just because some entity says that things are fantastic doesn't mean that's always the case. Look at MITRE, for example. MITRE was held as one of the main guideposts for what you wanted to be able to prevent against. But MITRE couldn't prevent against the things that they were telling people to prevent against. So how is it that you trust an entity saying this needs to be done when they don't even adhere to it?
So the question, just started.
Exactly. So the question I would have, and what everybody should be looking at, is what security does Gartner actually leverage? Gartner makes all these recommendations saying that things are amazing, and these are the people that are leading the industry for their different segments. Are they actually leveraging those industry leaders, or are they just there to try and promote different things? I've long said that I have suspicions about how certain entities end up in certain spots on Gartner. The preemptive area is a little bit different, because it's not everybody doing the same thing. There are not as many vendors, that actually does preemptive security at this point. So it's not like there's a bunch of people competing and trying to get a potentially unethical advantage in their rankings to look better, because there is only one vendor at this time. So my question would be, if Gartner is saying that preemptive security is the way that everything needs to go, are they looking to implement preemptive security? And are they providing you with the necessary information to have conversations about why you need preemptive security? Saying you need it is great. They say people need to wear their seatbelts. I promise you they don't. They say that you're not supposed to use a chainsaw on yourself. If that was the case, there wouldn't be a warning on chainsaws saying not for use on self. Okay, somebody did it. So obviously the questions need to be asked. And this is where every environment, everybody that is in a position of making any decision about software and security within their environment, and I'm not just talking about the CISO, the chief information scapegoat officer. They are not the ones that are the only person that should be making these kinds of decisions. If you are working in a role as a SOC analyst and you guys are consistently getting hit with things that you see other vendors preventing, the question should be, why are we settling for mediocrity? Why are we not implementing something that's better? Your job and your obligation is to keep your customers safe, right? When are you going to settle for mediocrity? You're not going to go and, ask a security guard to try and handle, the crown jewels, right? You have a specialized task force that handles that. Same thing goes with security. When you're dealing with things like ransomware and new variants of malicious, code, you don't want to ask the person that is just barely functional to be able to guard that. You need a specialized response. And that's why EDR is not where it should be for this kind of attack. We've done it numerous times. We've bypassed EDRs. And the response that we've gotten back in some cases is, well, we're not supposed to catch that. Really? You're not designed to catch TTPs from threat actors? If you're not catching them, then they're getting through. That's where preemptive comes in. Preemptive has the ability to take that unknown and keep you safe from it.
I want to correct your terminology there before you continue. Just for anyone who may still be confused, EDR does not stop anything. Everything gets
EDR
through
has response actions which are automated, but if the TTPs do not get caught, then nothing happens.
Yeah, so to be clear, there's no stopping, right? There's no preventative action being taken. So, just wanted to throw that out there. So it seems to be a huge confusion in the cybersecurity world as to why EDR is seen as cybersecurity and not just an alarm. So what's the big takeaway here? Ransomware isn't just about stolen data. It's about operational paralysis when attackers compromise shared third-party systems. They can grind entire industries to a halt, right? In aviation, that means grounded flights, stranded passengers, and broken trust. The Collins Aerospace incident should be a wake-up call. Prevention, vendor accountability, and resilience planning aren't optional, they're mission critical. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's Safety Brief. Stay vigilant, stay prepared, and remember, prevention always beats detection. Thank you so much.